conversation. It's the conversation. Y'all ready? Y'all ready? Let's go. Let's go. No filter, no restrictions. You about to get my opinion in its purest form. So my words, don't try to spin them. What I said is what I said. And what I said, I meant it. The gloves are off now when I'm coming out swinging. So engage in verbal combat, but you better be ready. Cause the tip for me is light work, even if the topic's heavy. I'm ready for it all with no running from nothing. You just take the time to digest what I put in. No rushing, but time is moving, don't waste it. You want the real, come and face it. Come sit and talk to me if you want it straight without a chaser. And it might burn a little when you step on up to taste it. But it's nothing harsh, I promise. Just a little conversation.
Well, welcome back to the conversation with Harold and Dave. As you'll notice, I am not Harold. I am Keon.
But I am Dave.
But he is Dave. So you still have the knowledge here. Okay, we've got the knowledge here. And today we're going to talk about extremist groups. And every group we're talking about may not be labeled an extremist group for one reason or another. But we're going to talk about not the extremist groups as a whole, but why is it so easy for them to recruit with all the knowledge that is accessible from people today, all the fact checking that you can do, all the promotions of tolerance? Why is it still so easy for extremist groups to recruit?
Well, and okay, we got to pull this apart a little bit. First of all, what do we mean by extremist groups? And in the sense that, if you're talking about QAnon people, right? And I assume we're not talking ISIS here. We're now talking about people who actually threaten us. And we met the enemy; he is us. And the thing about it is, in a lot of ways, I keep going back to Hillary Clinton's infamous statement where she used the term deplorable, right? And the thing is, at the time, Hillary was saying, look, there are a lot of people that are supporting Donald Trump that are what I think we're talking about as extremists. They are, and those were the people she called deplorable. And she said, and then there are other people who aren't. And she was trying to distinguish between the two. Her problem, and first of all, the point she was trying to make and failed so miserably to do is that, yes, there are some odious people that are rallying around Trump, but there are a lot of other decent folks, and we need to understand what's driving them. And that completely got lost because I think she did not understand. She had this idea that the decent folk that she was thinking of were economically left behind, and she had a plan. She had a plan for that. God love Hillary, but it was always like, we have a plan. And the thing was, she just didn't grab on that. No, there is a fundamental identity issue going on. And when she said they were deplorable, a lot of those good folks, almost most of them, I'd say, said, oh, you just called me deplorable. They did not realize that she probably was saying they weren't. And my point here is this: there's twofold to this. One, I think we have a lot of trouble with people dealing with an identity, with kind of social issues. Where is the society? Where do I fit in? And the fancy term for this is ontology or ontological. What do we think exists out there? And who are the good people? Who are the bad guys, right? When you make a statement about who the good guys and bad guys are, you're making an ontological statement. And there's a thing known as ontological security that a lot of people, they need to understand what the threats are in the world, where the world is, where they fit. And a lot of the people Hillary was, alienating, their problem wasn't that they had been left behind economically. It was that they were being left behind socially, that the world was evolving away from what they understood. They didn't, the people who did field work on the Tea Party said, these folks don't recognize America anymore. They're nostalgic for this old view. And we have, I think, in a lot of what's going on the right with the Republican Party, we have a group of people who are alienated. They're seeing the world change, and it really upsets them. Listen to what DeSantis says at some level. Fight him to the bitter end, by God. But I think you need to listen to what he says, because he is, in many ways, I think, articulating the issues that people have, the things that piss these folks off better than Trump. I think DeSantis is picking up on this. And so the point is that was one issue. The other issue is that there's people who aren't extremists, right? You don't have to be an extremist to say, I don't recognize America anymore. The things I was taught as a kid, especially if you're someone my age or older, and you have this sort of complexion, and you have my gender, right? And you grew up not understanding there was a difference between gender and sex, right? Those are the folks who, it is almost a factual statement how could they not say, I don't recognize the world in which we live, right? So many of the things that they understood, that I understood as just, men are men, women are women, right? We didn't, what's this cisgender business? I don't even understand what that is. They are, it's a different world, right? And so now some people are okay with it. I think I'm in that category. I'm like, I never thought of that. That's interesting. And I move on in life. Other people, their understanding of the world, their understanding of what is and isn't, where they fit in it, collapses, and they have a real problem. Now, having said all that, I think in a lot of times when you talk about extremists, you have extremists nested in a broader social movement, right? And so, and in some cases, people that we might say, like the terrorists of the IRA, right? The provisional IRA and the real IRA, and the people, we might say they were extreme because they killed people, but their point of view, their goals, weren't necessarily weird, right? Because there are a lot of people, was it John Lennon or Paul McCartney? I think who wrote the song "Give Ireland Back to the Irish," right? You don't have to be extreme to say, "Hey, Ireland should have greater freedom."
Yeah.
And so I think that's the point. That so we have a mass social movement, or a situation where a large number of people are at sea about their identity, about how they fit into the country, and who are trying to understand themselves, and they are susceptible then to people who will lead the way, who will give them a identity, and most importantly, who will identify the bad guys. Because a lot of times you feel better about the world by identifying the people who are making it so miserable for you. And in that environment, I think Donald Trump shows up, and in fact, the Trump wing of the Democratic Party are showing up and saying, look, it's Hillary Clinton who's done this to you, and they're taking away, they're questioning everything, they're making it bad to be religious, making it bad to be male, making it bad to be heterosexual, and that resonated. People I knew who I had some respect for at the time, well, and even my father, I'm visiting him, walking the dog, and he hated Trump, but he would say, but man, he just says what I think sometimes, right? He just comes out with it. He, kind of gave that voice to it. Now, I think when we talk about extreme, all right, so that's big people. But when you're talking, if you're in that environment, if you're in this environment where your ontological security has fallen, that is to say, you have this sense that there's a French word, anomie, this loss of self, this belief that the world is not what it used to be, people can't be trusted. You start looking to make sense of it, and then you get this, you're open to people telling you stories of, the technical term is security stories, about why people are doing things, why people are threatening you. And you can have a major political party do that for you, or you could go on the internet and find a chat room and have somebody else give you something. And so I think that what we have, as in many times is the case with extremist groups, is we have some kind of social issue. And then we have, and so we have people at sea, we have people seeking a better understanding. And then you have people who become more and more radical, who are broken off from that.
Mhm.
And that has always been kind of the way of groups, right? Whatever group you're talking about. I mean, the Israelis, right? When British were leaving Palestine, they had a mainstream group that was seeking to, become a state. And then they had the Irgun, who were happy to kill people, right? Who thought nothing of taking a British sergeant off the street, taking him into a room in a house and hanging him and sending the picture right out. I mean, we would call that extreme. So, all groups have this. But right now, I think we have that very much going on. We have that atmosphere, right? Okay, so where does that get us? I've been rambling on there, but that gets us to where we have that condition for it. So I could keep going, but you want to ask a question?
No, I was waiting for you to run out of steam, because that was a lot.
I will not. I will not.
We touched a lot of areas, and I know we separate. When it's a good thing you were asking, well, what is an extremist group? Because anyone who thinks differently can be viewed by somebody as an extremist group. You have your different labels for groups. You have your hate groups. You have your extremist groups. You have your radical groups. But we think of all of them as one big ball. When you're talking about how easy it is for an extremist group, to recruit socially. I think of a hate group. When you're thinking of the KKK and groups like that, how they recruit so easily, because you get someone that has those deals. You said something about people not recognizing the America they grew up with. That's the thing that always stings me, because America's ever changing since its inception. So it's like your inability to evolve with what's going on around you is somehow everyone else's fault.
Well,
when we talk about the things like gender identity and all of these things, I always laugh, because this stuff's been around for a while. It's just to the forefront now because we can openly talk about it. But sex changes and gender changes didn't just start last year in 2020. I think COVID got everybody in the house on the internet a way lot more than we were getting on, and now you have all of this information that you're forced to look at because you're now stuck in a house all day. That's a part of it, but I just feel like your inability to evolve with what's going on should not be a reason to find out it's everyone else's fault to why you don't recognize the America that you envisioned or you see nostalgically through the nostalgic glasses as we go through time. Go ahead, Dave.
Well, no, and at some point, like when we were talking about critical race theory and they had the Florida rule, and it was really, a lot of people said, oh, so your problem is that you're worried about white people being uncomfortable, right? And honestly, when I'm on with you and Harold, right, and I'm sitting here like, yeah, I'm privileged, I'm just dripping with privilege. The point though is that I am like, I kind of feel I'm in that zone, right? Because think of all the struggles. It's like so cute that you're uncomfortable. Let me tell you about uncomfortable, and which I'm sure.
Hold on, Dave. It's funny that you said that. Hold on, Dave. It's funny that you said that, because when there's a lot of people who get insulted, especially if you're Caucasian and you bring up white privilege, because they'll look at it and go, what privilege do I have? I'm just as broke as you. And not understanding that's not what we mean by privilege. If me and Dave walk, they've done these tests over for so long. We did it in college where we sent in applications, the same exact application, copied the same exact stuff. All we did was change the names on the applications, And you already know where I'm going with this experiments. You know, the Xaviers, the Trayvons didn't get as many good replies as the John Smiths and the Martin, Johnsons, and so that's an experience. I just had an experience the other day. My boss is looking for commercial property, and so one of the places she looked at when she was here, the windows are painted, so we couldn't see in. So I walked by the other day because I was going to go eat, and the guy opens the doors open, and I'm looking. I'm like, whoa, this is way bigger than I thought. So I'm kind of looking around. The guy walks up like, may I help you? I'm like, yeah, we were looking to buy some commercial property. So I was looking and I couldn't see, and now I can see the size of it. So I'm just trying to, well, you can have whoever needs to buy it come by and look at it today if they want. We just can't have you standing here. I said, well, my boss is in her house in South Dakota and she's going to her house in California next week, so she won't be here for a while. As soon as I said that, his whole demeanor changed. I don't know if that meant, oh, this is a person with money. It's like, oh, well, like the whole persona, not persona, but the whole, you know what I mean? His whole demeanor changed when I showed him my boss on the phone. And I'm like, well, this is my boss and she won't be here. And then his whole demeanor changed. Why could you not have that demeanor when you were talking to me?
Well, have you met you?
Yeah. Very nice.
I'm sorry that was there.
Touche.
No, well, actually, having met you, I don't understand because you, no. I mean, to be clear, if you meet John, he's the nicest guy I'd ever want to meet. So I don't understand why anyone would not be nice with you. Black, white, purple, whatever. Mm-hmm. The thing is, though, all right, sure, there's that, everything you just said, but hey, man, I was just trying to explain to you the point of view of people who are going through a lot of emotional angst, that have had their understanding of the world, their security mechanism that keeps the terrors of the world at bay, makes them understand themselves and where they fit. All of that has been pulled out from under them, right? Mm-hmm. And we then went into a discussion that did it some more, right? That talked about white privilege, and this is why they hate the woke shit. Okay. Yeah. Because there is I think a feeling amongst, and again, not, God help me, don't make me talk for DeSantis, but at another level, this is the thing is, hey, look, you libs, or whatever, are attacking us. You're not understanding our problems, right? Or you're not speaking to that, right? And this is the thing that, and like I say, this is why I think Hillary's whole attempt to separate out the folks failed, because she represented a group of people who were not answering the question. And so here's the thing is, we're caught in this dilemma of people that feel that their point of view is not being taken seriously and is considered invalid and is rejected. And I don't know if it's a dilemma, because at some level, that's right. We don't consider it valid. We don't take it seriously. And it's an object of scorn. Right. And so, that's always my question. When people want to meet in the middle, I'm like, I don't know where the middle is on this, because if you aren't willing to accept that you have white privilege, then you have a problem with folks, right? If you're not comfortable with that. And in fact, that's where I think we see the general condition. Mm-hmm. Now, when we get down to extremists, what you do, people who become radicalized, generally it's a social process. Generally, it's a process by which they get in with people that finally start explaining the world to them. And they start telling them stories that cast other people in negative roles, and explain why what's happening to them is wrong and why they are in fact, in a good position, and they're meeting the social psychological needs of those folks, and you reinforce it and you get people down. And the thing is, once upon a time, with classical terrorist organizations, you did this face to face, right? You found a guy in a pub who was bad mouthing the British, and you brought him along and you brought him into your organization and you introduced him to Marxist ideology, because, by the way, the IRA had a very strong Marxist element in its more extreme things, and you start filling him up, and by degrees you move him, usually him, but often there were women too, him or her along, and you get them, through just kind of this process of reinforcing, giving them social clues, cutting them off from other contacts, like a cult. I mean, you groom them, and eventually they'll kill people, right, or blow themselves up. I mean, today what we see is we have the internet, and so the internet provides, you don't have to meet the guy in the pub, and you don't have to have that connection. So I think a lot of it is, I don't know that there's anything so unique. I think loss of self is something that the concept of anomie was, Derrida came up with that in the 19th century. I mean, it's been around for hundreds of years. What we have today is a situation where you can go online and you self-select. People self-select into their little Reddit groups or whatever, and they start clicking on things. And you can be on Facebook and you just click on something, and then
it is crazy the amount of support someone who can belch a bunch of untruths, like the amount of money and support they can amass. And I always find that weird, because a lot of the people supporting them and giving them all this money are people who should not be spending their money. I mean, we look at the Alex Jones situation, and it's like, I just can't fathom. Maybe it's one of those things. You told me this a long time ago. I don't know if you remember. It was about 5 years ago when I was trying to make sense of something. And you said, well, Keone, you're trying to think of an irrational thing using a rational mind. You're going to drive yourself crazy. And I remembered that. It's like, okay, I'm trying to make sense out of something that doesn't make sense. And that's part of my problem. It's just one of those things I can't wrap my head around, Dave.
Well, and, to a certain extent, people like to have things confirmed, right? Mm-hmm. Remember I talked, I know it sounds like this egghead crap to talk about ontological security, but this idea that I understand who's good and who's bad in the world, right? And so the thing is, though, news that confirms your ontological beliefs, right? Really fancy way of saying your view of the world. That's great. That makes you feel good, even when it's someone doing bad. So if you hate Democrats, right? If you think Democrats are destroying the world, and to be honest, I'm not that far away from feeling, Democrats are not. I'm not a Democrat, right? I'm an independent Republican-leaning guy, right? The thing is, though, if you, I don't quite hate Dems, but if you do. Right. And you get that, if they start telling you that they eat children, you entertain it. Right. And even if you don't believe it, it brings a smile to your face. Right. That's bizarre. Right. You and I would be like, most people would reject it. And in fact, you kind of get a sense that there's this unspoken thing that, we know this is not really true, but we are sharing with one another. In sharing these stories, we are sharing our point of view and the attitude, we are confirming your attitude and socially supporting it by telling you this thing. Because at a certain level, if you believe that these guys, someone said this about the pizza parlor where the guy showed up with the gun because he had read online that the pizza parlor had a child prostitution ring going on. And people had been promoting this on the right. And the thing was, somebody, a columnist said this, look, if that's true, that they've got, you should show up with a gun. All of us should. We should all storm the place and free the children from the sex ring. But that's not the case. And the people who, and the question is to all the people who were circulating this, if you believed this, why didn't you do anything? Why is this guy the only guy who shows up? And then when he shows up, you condemn him?
Yeah.
Because at some level, it's a wink, wink. We know it's not really true, but
that's that thing that gets me too. We've seen the people who have gained a lot of support for an idea or a certain, ideology or whatever. And then you come to find out that person doesn't even really believe in it, but they were sucking in all the money and support and getting this group built up. And they don't even believe half the things that are coming out of their mouth.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's the thing is that people that can be entrepreneurs, right? I mean, that's the way we talk. You can talk about them as idea entrepreneurs. We can talk about identity entrepreneurs, people who are going out and trying to say, all right, this is what's going on. They're telling a story, or ideological entrepreneurs, if you want. The people who are going out and telling a story, are explaining the world. And if they do it well, they get big benefits. They become Alex Jones with InfoWars, right? They become governor of Florida, right? For sure, right? DeSantis, what is a politician if not an idea entrepreneur, right? He's selling ideas. They can be good, they can be bad, right? Barack Obama was selling an idea, right? And, it was, now, we might like that set of ideas better than these other ones, but the point, though, is
overcorrection on that, right?
But the point is that, do you actually, you don't necessarily have to believe it to benefit from it. And so, hey, look, I got a YouTube channel with 200, I made it to 220 subscribers. Yay. Nothing I ever do will go viral because I won't get out and tailor it for the max impact. I won't try to find that niche.
Right.
I won't try to be Donald Trump. I won't be the id. Right.
Speaking of that, and we're talking about information. We know we had the Margot rate. I always say it wrong.
Mar-a-Lago.
Oh, yeah, Mar-a-Lago. You'd think I'd say it right since I'm from Miami, right? So we know the things that were retrieved and all of that, but then you still have these websites and stations. Hey, they found absolutely nothing, and leave him alone, and it's a witch hunt, and why are they looking for papers? And I'm laughing because I'm watching these comments from the same people who were so adamant that Barack Obama show his birth certificate. Birth certificate, nuclear stuff.
That is something about a personal, when you have Trump has kind of gotten to a point where he has gotten this personal attachment where people have really glommed onto him, and he's created this, cult of personality that is it's a term that gets used, which is actually communist in origin. But people talk about that. And they do say that it's very common that populist leaders, even though they complain about what other people do, they do the same things.
Yeah.
Right. And so we're going to complain about elections being insecure. And then, we're going to find people who are, in fact, screwing them up. Right. And in North Carolina, it was, the only cases we really had were on the right. And the thing was that part of it is, look, the other, you vilified the other side. The idea of populism is there's this virtuous public that we're part of, and we are beset by some kind of elite. And in right-wing populism, there's the elite in conjunction with another social group that threatens us, right? Who aren't us, they're them. They aren't real Americans, right? I saw a bumper sticker in Maine, which has its smattering of far-right people. And there were some cars that just drove around with all sorts of, this was completely covered with stickers. But one truck wasn't too covered, but it had one thing, save America by being American, right? And I was like, that just encompasses it, because there's this idea, there's one true American type.
Right. That's the thing right there. What are you saving?
Well, and that's the populism. And so the point, though, is that if you are in that us, like Trump is the leader of us,
Mm-hmm.
for them, right? Not us, although I kind of look like, I don't know, I sometimes worry about that. The thing is, though, that Trump is the leader, and generally with the populists, it's like, look, it's our guy doing it, so it's okay, right? Yeah. And it's only fair that we do it because the other guys do it to us, right? Yeah. And that is very common in a populist group, by both the personal nature of the leaders. Populist groups tend to have somebody become the personal leader, as we saw Trump did as Orban from Hungary. He came over. It's not for nothing that they had the guy from Hungary come over and talk to CPAC, because it's another populist leader. And so, yeah, they're rallying around it. And so consistency arguments, it's like, Trump said he just took the fifth like 400 times, or it was some outrageous number. He was, called to testify, and he took the Fifth Amendment several hundred times, when he's on record for saying if someone takes the fifth, they're guilty, right?
Yeah, but it's okay,
that's not the logic that's going on. It's about right. Trump says what these folks think. He says, he makes them feel better. He provides a vision of America that might not be realistic, but it's got that truthiness, right? So and that's important, and that's valuable. And they love that he pisses off. They love that he pisses off the Dems, the libs, or whatever pejorative term these folks want to use. And they revel in it. And if you're not in it, it's hard to understand it, I think.
It's so sad. So sad. A friend of mine, he's Caucasian, and he has a very racist dad. One of my friends, not racist, but his dad, because when we were growing up, he used to tell his dad all the time, listen, I don't have the energy to like call upon the hate that you have, but you're my dad. What the hell do I do? So he went to his dad. I remember it was like third year into Trump's presidency. He said, Dad, you complained for 8 years that you didn't have a job because of Obama. Trump's been in office 3 years and you're still unemployed. Whose fault is it now? And his dad was like, shut up. Because his dad was waving the pom-poms of, when we get Obama out of here, I'm going to get my job back. I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. And it was like, no, you're going to do the same exact thing you've been doing for 8 years, which is sit on your ass and collect government funds. But help me out here. No one has still been able to explain to me this America that we need to go back to and save. What is this America that, and I keep asking people who say that, well, save America. We need to go back to when America was better. And I'm like, when was that? And what does that look like?
Yeah. And it's a fictional history, right? And again, this is, when people have studied populist movements, it's not just Trump. It's not just here. Almost all right-wing populist movements project a historic, a reimagined history, right? And a lot of times they go back. They focus on one part of the history. They have imagined glories and imagined grievances, and they'll focus on one element versus another. And we see Putin's doing this now as he's reimagining Russia, and he's projecting this vision of imperial Russia, right? So it's a very common political, social thing. And this nostalgia, I mean, people are always nostalgic, right? Yeah. It's always better in the past. But it is a question. That was my problem with Make America Great Again. I was offended by that because I'm like, America's always been great. I mean,
Yeah.
it's got its problems, but I wouldn't trade it. And in
It
fact,
means so many different things to so many different people. It's like if you say, well, it was better back in the 70s. Well, that's why I think I wish time machines around. It's like go back to the 70s and ask the people that were in the 70s who were in their 20s and 30s how, you know, uh, what are the problems that are going on today? And then you hear people in the 70s talking about, well, back in the 50s, it's always going to be a thing, but it's that nostalgia that people can't realize they're looking at it through nostalgic eyes. I believe I do it all the time. I was a teenager in the 90s, and my friends will get in an argument because they'll talk about how great certain things were in the 90s, and I'm pointing out all the crap in the 90s. And it's like, how are you forgetting this happened, and this happened, and this happened, and this happens? And it's like, what are you talking about? But
there was more war and terrorism in the 70s and 80s.
I lived in Miami in the 80s and 90s. That war on drugs, I saw that daily in the streets.
Yeah, and then domestically, the violence peaked in the 90s.
Oh, yeah. Yes, yeah. A lot of music got more angry in the 90s. In the 90s, we started a lot of things, but but there again. So what time period are we going back to with this get America back to what it used to be and where it was?
Well, that is part of the ideology of a party, and that is part of the story people tell. And it is always it's going to be something that comes up as part of the security stories that people tell about who are the threats and who are the safety, what's safe. And it evolves, right? And so, but the nostalgia, you're right. I mean, the thing is,
yeah, Dave, I love, not to cut you off, but I love being able to get in the same pool as you. I'm just saying. I like being able to get in the same pool as Dave. Okay.
As long as it's not a hot tub. Although I could do worse, honestly. You're young.
I like being able to eat at the same restaurant as Dave. Dave's wife,
which you wouldn't have been allowed to.
Right? That's right. And Dave's wife, who's white, she loves being able to apply for her own credit card without needing her husband there.
And that brings me back around to
it's not just racial stuff.
Yeah, when people talk about take feminism, right? Mm-hmm. And you can be all upset about feminist points of view or other things, and the thing is that when you go back in time, right, when you look at what Betty Friedan was dealing with, right, and how she was moving forward, and the status of women at that time, like you bring up, a woman couldn't have a bank account without her husband. She couldn't, and it's just, the thing is, the people who are upset about the feminists today, right, who will talk about the feminazis or whatever, that's kind of old. That might be a couple of decades since that was a thing. When I would hear that kind of thing, I would be like, well, you really don't want to go back to the 50s. You really don't want to go back to that, because let's talk about the way women were treated. You would not accept it. I say to a lot of guys, look, you wouldn't think that was okay. There's no way you'd be on board for the crap that went on back then. And so, maybe we've evolved to worrying about issues like, are we implying things in gender? Are we, if I always have this trouble, I want to express kind of a wimpiness or some kind of thing. And it used to be, oh, you're crying like a little girl. Well, okay, can't say that now, right? And the thing is, like, yeah, you probably shouldn't. And maybe hopefully that's where we are in the debate. But the fact that you might not like that you can't, that you're getting crap and being vilified for saying something like that, which maybe you should, the point is that, hey, look, there were issues that just don't even, were cray cray. You were, and the things that women did, the suffering they had in the home, the drug abuse, the depression,
Mm-hmm.
just the status, so being subject to domestic violence, right? I mean, we would never accept that. And so if the issues are more evolved and they seem trivial to you, it's like, well, no, they're not, or certainly it doesn't impugn the movement. And
Mm-hmm.
certainly let's not get nostalgic for the day that you could, call, you could ask a woman to smile, right?
Mm-hmm.
I love the episode of Blackish, right? I'm
Uh-huh.
trying to remember. It was Blackish, right? I'm remembering the name, right? The TV show.
Yeah, that
Andre,
is a TV show. I don't know if it's the one. Yeah, well, you said Andre, so yes, you're on the right
Andre,
path.
yeah,
Yeah,
Andre Anderson.
yeah, you're on
Yeah.
the. Yeah.
And when his kids take him out, and they're like, no, and the waitress comes up, she goes, come on, smile, and his son is like, oh my God, Dad, you can't do that. And the thing is that, that's what I'm thinking about, that those issues are important, and I don't want to trivialize them because,
Well, you're not trivializing. I got in an argument with somebody yesterday because I always get in these tiffs with people who are like, the world's too soft and it's PC. I was like, I said, forgive us for not letting you call black people the N-word, calling a woman the B word and smacking her in public, calling Hispanics by the wrong name, calling a homosexual a sissy or the F word, or like, excuse us for not allowing people to just openly do that anymore. I notice the people who complain the most about PC culture are people who say a lot of bad shit. and do a lot of things that they shouldn't be doing. Someone like you who don't call people out of name, don't treat people terrible, you could give two bleeps.
oh, I can call people names.
No, I know you can, but
I'm just
you know
smarter than to do it on the damn web.
it's just that's the thing that kills me. Now, somebody might say, "Where are you guys going?" Well, we're kind of going around, but all of this stuff plays into, our main topic today.
Well,
People that are sick of certain things. I'm tired of the world that's too soft, PC culture. I'm tired of woke. I'm tired of what do we used to hear back in the 90s, Dave? It was all the Mexicans are coming and stealing our jobs, and then
taking
people
a
were like,
job.
how are they stealing a job that you don't even want to do? You've been unemployed for a year.
And we got a labor shortage, folks. Yeah. I mean, the country ain't going to work if we don't bring in more people. Now, maybe we need people with better educations than the folks that are coming in. Maybe we need, we need a different mix of folks with job skills.
I think that's because that's what's happening, Dave. As you go by generations, less and less people want to go into the family business or want to go out there and do. Because I remember when I was little, my grandfather in Miami used to take me to do he used to do the roofing, he used to do plumbing, he used to fix people's driveways. I got tired of being on a roof in August in Miami as a 10-year-old. He ruined me for labor. I said, you ruined me. I don't want to do any of these jobs. So who the hell is going to do it? It's not saying those are worthless jobs that only immigrants can do, but somebody's got to do the road work in the heat,
Well, and we need more importantly, somebody has to do the jobs that we actually need people to do is elder care.
Yeah.
I mean, and there are a lot of those services jobs, and that is in fact when I've been dealing with my parents, and we had a procession of people come in for in-home care, and none of them were born in the U.S. Right now, it's up in New Jersey, but not one that came in. We had a bunch that rotated through because we had a service, and the thing is that's a great job. It takes a lot of time. It's really, but that's another kind of job that like anyone can do. Right. You just need to be patient, you get it, and then help someone up. And the thing is that there's a need for that. And we have critical shortages in this. And I like to share I was on a Saturday up at my daughter's. It was a hot day. And I went out it was early in the morning. I go out to get coffee at a convenience store, and they're a bunch of Latino guys in the truck, and they're buying up stuff because they are going to obviously go out and work. And I reflected on Joshua Chamberlain, of all things, who accepted the rebel surrender at the end of the Civil War. And he was famous for, watching the Confederates come up, and he said, hey, these guys have fought. All the deserters are gone. All the people who couldn't hang are gone. And he said, was not such manhood to be welcomed into the Union, so tested and assured. And he brought his troops to attention, and well, they saluted, right? He's famous for having done this. And the thing is, I was walking by these guys, weird story.
Don't tell me you saluted. No,
but I looked at them and I said, these guys are going to go out and they're going to work really hard today on a Saturday. I'm going to be hanging out with my granddaughter. And I just looked at him, and I had in my head, all I heard is not such manhood to be welcomed into the Union, so tested and assured. I felt, okay, you might be worried about the manhood thing, but Joshua Chamberlain, 1800s. You could say
I know what you mean. I know. I don't get it.
And I just looked at him. I said, look, isn't this American? Aren't these the people that we want here? And I respect these guys. They're going to go out and they're going to work hard. And what?
But there's going to be some,
where do you come from? And are there more of you there?
Listen, in Miami, and I'm not saying this to be racial, but in Miami, I don't know if this happened everywhere else. I know it's a running. It must be, because it was a joke on Family Guy as well. Anytime I would go down to the Home Depot, you would see a bunch of Mexicans waiting and people will pull up and pick up trucks. Hey, I need a roofer. Hey, I need a plumber. Hey, I need this, and that. And like you just said, they're out there, they're trying to work hard, they're making a living, and somebody who's unemployed looks at them and go, they're stealing our jobs. And then they preach that to the other people who don't have jobs. And then you have the anger and the hatred. And it's like, you could do the same thing. If you really wanted to work, you could do the same thing.
Oh. And so, we go down that road. And again, now we are foaming off. We're being all woke, and
yeah.
And these
How dare you be woke at your age, Dave? How dare you? You're supposed to be get off my lawn. Things were better.
I'm just not asleep. That would be. But I probably need a couple more cups of coffee before I'm fully woke. But these are the things that we've kind of gotten off onto this tangent.
That's okay. It's called the conversation for a reason.
It's called a conversation. We started down this road by talking about the id and the how people tell a story and they make us nostalgic, and they're offering a story of America that is good. Now, there's another aspect to this that I should bring up to be annoyingly professorial. There are, you said, why don't you get over, and it's a democracy. And Karen Stenner has done a lot of work on this and looking at what she calls the authoritarian dynamic. And there are folks, it's a psychological disposition. You can be more authoritarian in your personality or less. And it goes to a question of how important you think the group is, right? And the society. And she measures authoritarianism in individuals by in surveys where they ask how you think kids should be raised. They ask a lot of questions that give choices. Do you think it's more important that children are taught to be creative, or that they're taught to follow the rules? Do you think it's more important that children should care about other people or be polite to their elders? And there's and that's how she measures the value people place on people, keeping true, right? And being American, right? And that guy, when he said, you want to save America, be American, right? And this idea, and so I think there are always, in all segments, there are authoritarian people. There are authoritarian white people. There are authoritarian black people. There are authoritarian, the disposition is psychological. It's just spread around according to Stenner and the research there. And the thing is, though, that black authoritarian people are going to be more, Nation of Islam-y, or at your church, people who think that you should, you probably know people, and they're not necessarily going to be conservative because the mainstream in the country is different. Amongst white people, though, a lot of conservatives will have this authoritarian thing. And I look at it and I say, hey, look, that the whole kneeling for the national anthem was just an issue that went straight to that disposition. What value do you place on people showing solidarity with the collective norms and ideas, and standing for the national anthem was an example of that, right? And everyone, and it made the authoritarians in the world freak out, right? The people with that disposition. And Stenner's research shows that a lot of that disposition was very much amongst white people, right? Because it plays out differently in different groups in terms of politics, depending on where they are.
It seeped into some of my African American veterans that I had to have tiffs with. It seeped, so it wasn't just that. It seeped into a lot of people who were non-white. And that part was even more baffling to me, but yeah.
Well, and so part of it is that, and what Stenner's research says is that, look, this idea that we will evolve, she says, look, you will not evolve past differing psychological dispositions. This is not an evolution. This is not a social thing. This is a psychological disposition that some people value solidarity with the group, and that's how they're going to be, right? They're going to want to teach their children to be respectful, polite, and they're going to value that over, it's kind of like in D&D, the difference between having a lawful alignment and a chaotic alignment, right? Although not exactly.
For those of you who don't know what D&D is, it's Dungeons and Dragons. Dave has brought in a Dungeons and Dragons example, everybody. We appreciate it.
Yeah. But and the thing is, though, that disposition, it plays out, and it is present according to Stenner and generally the social psychology research. It is present there. And Stenner's whole thing is like, look, she says that people are going to have a limit, right? There's always going to be 30%-ish of the population who is going to have this predisposition towards valuing solidarity with the group, and what's perceived as the group. Now that can change, right? Mm-hmm. And it does. Everybody, that's why African Americans with authoritarian predisposition weren't out voting for Trump. They interpreted, and I don't know, I'm not going to project, but they interpret solidarity with the group, and they probably, and you identify the group however you identify it. In the United States, you're kind of forced to identify it as black and white or African American and Caucasian, and other countries, they don't,
No, they just call you an Englishman.
Hey, I just remember that
they don't call you a black German.
I remember this guy from Venezuela who talked about going to the Dominican Republic, and he, the Dominicans were telling him just how dangerous black people were, right? And and the guy's talking to him, and it dawns on him that they would think his girlfriend was black. And it's one thing to say, hey, some of my best friends, right? That old line. But it's another level of racial blindness to say, oh, come to think of it, my girlfriend is black. You never noticed? because it wasn't an issue in Venezuela. They didn't see it. Yeah, she was dark, but we don't have, in the Dominican Republic, they had very socially, constructed differences. And in Venezuela, he was just like, I don't know, she's a little darker than me, but I never thought that was a difference, right?
Yeah.
Kind of like, blondes and brunettes, right? So I guess that, that goes to this thing of like, what do you see and how do you do it? But wow, that was a big, we went off script there. The point though is that how it plays out depends on that. But for democracy, right, can you always attribute validity to the other side? Because that's what it takes. And that was her argument that look, the authoritarians can't see validity in in the people that challenge the main group, right? And they just inherently can't see it. So they can't see the validity of kneeling, right? It's just straight up a thing. And my thing is, there's this problem of, in return, are we seeing the validity of their point of view?
Well, I don't see it when it's the same person that's texting on their cell phone at the football stadium during the national anthem, and now they're upset because someone kneeled. They're eating, or they're waving down the hot dog vendor during the national anthem, and the hot dog vendor's trying to stand still. So, I went to Dolphin games. I went to football games. When I was in the Army and I would go watch my team at visiting stadiums, the things I could recall before the kneeling thing, when I used to go to different stadiums in the late 90s and 2000s, the national anthem. So I was at the Rams Stadium when they were in St. Louis, and the national anthem was playing. People are doing all kinds of stuff. They're eating, they're on the cell phone, they're watching YouTube, they're doing all of these things.
And I guess it is that is an issue at it all. But my big point though is that we have this thing, and that there may always be a tension, right, between the demands of democracy that are you respect the opposition, which is clearly what we don't see anymore, right? We don't see the mutual respect that political opponents used to have. John Kennedy and Barry Goldwater were planning to have a debate campaign where they would travel together to cities. This is obviously before Kennedy was assassinated. They would go to cities and debate. They would, but they would travel together and they would show the country that they were going to debate, but that they were Americans together, that they had a shared commitment. And so Barry Goldwater, mind you.
We saw that more recently, Dave, with John McCain and Barack Obama. They were political adversaries, but they had a mutual respect for each other and could be cordial and talk, even more than cordial. And one of the reasons I always point out that John McCain lost is he was going to lose anyway, in my estimation. But one of the things where he really lost a lot of people was when he was too humanizing to Obama. I remember, and it's on YouTube very famously, that he was at a convention and the little old lady was like, he's a terrible person, he's a Muslim, he's this and that. And John McCain grabbed the mic and said, listen, we could disagree with his politics, but he's a wonderful man, he's a wonderful father. And they were booing him.
Yeah. Well,
all because he said nice things about his opponent.
And that, that is something that is not there. But it has diminished. And, I think partly, part of it is here. All right, let me, when is this?
And by the way, it's not right now because you're about to give your final thoughts.
Oh, fine. Well, and I think we'll leave it there. That we have a lot of things going on. That there's an air of alteration of identity in the society, and why is it easy to recruit extremists? Well, because that's going on, and it's just that's one small group. They have the internet, they have a lot of tools they can use, but all of us are struggling with this, and even on our own way, we are. here. And I think that's the answer of why it's easier for these groups to find an audience.
I believe you, David. And when we say we struggle, because you can hear it in my voice pattern. And sometimes when you're talking, we're thinking and we're like, how can I get this out to minimize how many people I offend, or that you get my point out and not just run with a clip of what I'm saying and turn around what I just said. So it is a struggle, but hey, that's why we have people like you that can eloquate it to us a lot better than me. I'm not going to be as, huh?
Oh, you do a good job. I
I
think you were just very eloquent right there. So
I thank you for your compliment. I'll take it. But the next episode of the conversation will be with Harold. Dave will be off in the Northeast, in the middle of nowhere, clinging on to any shred of internet that he can get his hands on.
and you feel free to follow our adventures on L Hayes Art at Facebook. You can see us and the dogs in Maine.
Do that, everybody. Do that. Follow him.
The videos really don't suck. I got to say, they really do not suck.
No, they don't. And what's your YouTube channel, Dave?
Well, my wife's is L Hayes Art, and those are the fun videos. If you want to see me and my Troy colleagues talking about international relations, and there's Lori.
Hey, Lori! Oh, we got a surprise. We hung on long enough to get a surprise from Lori. Your husband's been here doing the thing that he does best, which is talk.
Yes,
he's very good at that.
And but just of course she shows up when I'm trying to plug my channel. But Dr. Dave Hayes, the YouTube channel's Dr. Dave Hayes. That's pretty my. I just started using that, like, I think for YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, everything. It's Dr. Dave Hayes.
All right. Awesome. Thanks, Dave. And as Tim the Tap Man says, we'll see you on the next one.
Take care.